So I think we're all in agreement that Scarlett Johansson's Ghost in the Shell is the worst entry in the franchise. Right?
A frog?
I am a fish.
Right? Right? Hello and welcome again to OLDTAKU New Tricks, where today the patrons over on Patreon have cast their votes and the results are in. They want me to hurt. In a way, I kind of saw this coming back when I made my Ghost in the Shell 2017 review, and while at the time I wasn't hearing anything good coming from the series, I reserved judgment until I could set aside some time to watch the series. And then I did. And I think I lost my head for a good solid 2 days. I swear I spent the entire time watching this series either taking notes or pacing back and forth in my living room going, why? You would think that I would be used to disappointment by now, but fandom has a way of surprising even the most jaded of individuals. So join me for a song, will you, as I sing unto you the ballad of Gitsack_2045. Alright, first of all, I hate the name. It reads like a poorly optimized file extension. It's also completely ungoogleable, for lack of a better term that we sadly need. But more to the point, it also clued me in that this is supposed to be dovetailing off the standalone complex canon of the series, which opens up a huge can of worms. Ghost in the Shell certainly is no stranger to branching continuities, and you can all argue until Ragnarok over what's the superior one. But the fact remains that this is supposed to be following the second season of standalone complex. Section 9 has now been scattered to the four winds, with the heart of the core, Major, Bato, Ishikawa, Saito, and this guy.
What was that supposed to be? You suck.
Leave me alone, I'm warming up.
More on him in a bit. Having found work as mercenaries for private military corporations engaged in what's known as sustainable war, a deliberate attempt to stimulate a ravaged economy that has globally collapsed. You know, just like Metal Gear Solid 4, the superior Metal Gear Solid to somebody, I'm sure. But while the Major and the gang are hooping and hollering it up in the Americas, seems that a new breed of cyborgs have mysteriously cropped up, possessing the processing power that dwarfs even the most advanced supercomputers, which allows them to perform incredible feats of utter ridiculousness.
They're breakdance fighting.
Dubbed post-humans like they were an insufferable electronica group on Bandcamp, or any electronica group, the team finds themselves dealing with not only the growing presence of these menacing cyborgs, but they also have to deal with the American NSA and their lapdog that looks suspiciously like Agent Smith.
The pleasure is mine. I'm John Smith.
So the Wachowskis stole from Ghost in the Shell, and then Ghost in the Shell stole from the Wachowskis, so now both of them have stolen your precious time. But from where have these post-humans come from? And what do they have to do with the current war-ravaged world? Yeah, search me. I watched the entirety of this godforsaken first season only to be left with a cliffhanger, because this is a Netflix show, and we can't very well let one goddamn episode end without trying to bait the audience to keep watching. Short of creating a legitimately engaging show, of course. So if you wanted a complete story, you're going to have to wait until season 2, which has already been confirmed. All that's left for me to do is just sit here and ruminate about how much this is a baffling, at times infuriating, and otherwise stupidly glorious show. Spoilers from here on out. I wasn't quite sure what to expect from 2045 other than being reminded that the opening for the first season of Standalone Complex has really aged terribly. But the last thing I expected was the complete tonal shift that 2045 would take. Now, as I said, there are a lot of differing continuities in Ghost in the Shell, but they all pretty much follow one set tone. You would find the occasional bit of levity here and there, but otherwise the shows and films were all pretty serious-minded. In stark contrast with the manga, which could stop on a dime and bust out a goofy face. or a sapphic love scene, but in 2045, it seems that returning series director and writer Kenji Kamiyama wanted to take things in a different direction. And because of that, it creates this top-down problem that just really does the characters dirty. It must be said that the first episode of the series did a fantastic job of just taking the cast of characters out back behind the shed and blasting enough buckshot to shred a moose. Apparently, since Section 9 was dissolved, the crew have been busying themselves with either being cops, as with Togasa, not even bothering to show up until half the season's over, like Pazu and Bulma, or by being the goddamn A-Team. So, Section 9 went from a top-secret government organization tasked with national security to a get-the-job-done-by-any-means-necessary merc group. Why?
Well, this ain't that nasty cyborg crap either. This is grade A, genuine, real deal beer.
Between you and me, this is my favorite part of the job.
Oh, it's because they get to pop off some brews and have fun. Say, do any of you remember that episode called Jungle Cruise? You know, the one where Bato has to confront his past as a jungle fighter in order to apprehend an American soldier who can't let go of the bloody conflict and has been skinning women alive while forcing them to watch? Yeah, do you remember how the finale of the episode was that Bato was being goaded into killing the American soldier, and he almost does, but then he learns to let go of the war and find inner peace?
Sorry, pal. I already fought my war and I'm through with it!
The hell you are, Bato, not when there's hot lead to fire and cold suds to boot! America! Japan! Even Motoko's characterization isn't safe from this hoorah mentality, going from a taciturn, subtle infiltrator who prefers stealth and precision, to having boxing matches with post-humans that are wielding metal gauntlets. Cripes, this series.
It wasn't all that hard since you guys weren't exactly lying low out there.
Keeping a low profile's not as entertaining.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Which is why you're helping to reform a top-secret infiltration team. This whole conceit is just dumb on so many levels, and the script seems completely apathetic to try and massage in this drastic change in scenery and setup, not just to the detriment of the characters, but also to the detriment of the plot. It's no more plain as day than in the very first few episodes when Section 9 is roped into helping the NSA after failing to stop a terrorist attack in a wealthy neighborhood.
From what I observed your team accomplished during that last operation, it seems to me you're the most qualified for what we need done.
Hello? They allowed a missile to blow up in the Hollywood Hills. I don't think anyone's putting this mission on their CV. Nor does the script seems at all concerned with trying to portray modern troubles and economic issues with any sense of grace or subtlety, electing instead to be as insultingly blunt as possible. Like the fact that these terrorists here are former students that have been crippled by their mountainous debt. And you can tell that these were former students, because despite being destitute for who knows how long, they still wear their Letterman jackets and talking football puns.
You hear that? We're totally surrounded.
Nothing but a little interception. Can't let the good 1%er down.
Or how about the fact that the wealthy patron that is supplying these students with weaponry and technology goes by the oh-so-conspicuous name, the good 1%er. Or perhaps the cherry on top, the fact that Japan has a new prime minister that is a blonde American businessman that many are suspicious is under foreign influence. Gee, I wonder who this guy is supposed to be analogous of. But hey, if they can't do right by their own established characters, or their own plot for that matter, then at the very least they could introduce us to some new characters.
Well, I mean, his name pretty much says it all.
Yeah, it's standard, as in the standard you use to measure greatness. I'll show all y'all.
Huh?
Later.
Or they can give us all the mental equivalent of an upper decker. Meet Standard, a completely useless joke of a character made evident by the fact that Bato calls him clown in Japanese.
What's no Shiro? Don't leave me hanging.
It means a super cool dude.
Then what the hell are you laughing about then?
He constantly screws up, he makes excuses for his lack of effectiveness, he brags about himself, all to the point where you have to wonder why in the world does Major even allow him to be in the group. It's actually more of a statement to just how incompetent Major and the gang are if they allow this guy into the group.
I may be a mercenary, but I'm first and foremost a law-abiding American.
Ishikawa, any signs of life?
Well, wait, I get it. They just wanted a punching bag, like Section 9 became a fraternity. Maybe the guy had to chug a gallon of milk in an hour just to earn his pledge pin. While I should be grateful that the character didn't last past the 6th episode, deciding to eject himself from the story by literally running off into the Hollywood Hills like he were Sasquatch, even that couldn't bring me much joy because Motoko decided to be a bitch.
So I stashed his real memories, along with some pay, in a file for safekeeping.
What?
If we ever need him, we just summon him with a password.
Okay, a lot to unpack here. I guess the intent was so that Section 9's existence wouldn't be known by somebody that's outside the circle, as it were, but then what would be the point in also having a command file to ostensibly hypnotize him back into service? Especially since the guy was the textbook definition of a liability. But hey, since they're gonna pay him, I guess they're in the moral right. So what if his actual memories were taken from him, and so what if his free will has to submit to a command line? Dude's gonna get the bag!
And let me guess, you never updated your barriers either.
Cool. If those dogs show up again, what'll I...
Played dead or something.
But why have only one unwelcomed, annoying character when you can have two? Especially when the second character is a completely incongruous, gibbering little pixie girl who has a really creepy fascination with Bato.
So you can work out. And listen,
Yeah, I don't accept gifts from strangers.
but I even went through the Tachikoma's files to find out what songs you like.
Because Lord knows what anime was missing these days is yet another fangirl! Look, Standalone Complex was towing the line with the Tachikomas admittedly, but paired up with this ceaseless irritation, the whole thing is just no longer defensible. And yet the stupid script and plot still keep finding new ways to tarnish the series as a whole, like when Agent Smith here blasts open the whole concept of cyberbrains.
Memorize these names. Don't even copy it to your cyberbrain.
So a cyberbrain is somehow partitioned off from your actual brain? Like, you can do this now? Shit, why don't people do this all the time? Do you know how many goddamn times someone's brain is hacked in the Ghost in the Shell universe, let alone just in Standalone Complex? Discord has a better security history. And besides, later on in this exact episode, Togusa had to give Agent Smith's lackeys the slip in order to suss out who was bugging the Prime Minister's office, which also meant erasing memories of Togusa from Agent Smith here.
Have we met before? Do I know you?
No. I've been working undercover in South America for Major Kusanagi.
So either Agent Smith is such a dumbass that he didn't heed his own advice and gave so little a shit about Togusa that he didn't even bother consciously remembering his own existence, or he was just bullshitting us all from the very beginning. It's like they wrote this script on the fly, which certainly would explain the clumsy as hell attempts to try and tie together such prescient themes of alienated youth, weaponized nostalgia, immigration and nationalism, outrage culture and mob mentality, and the crumbling safety net for our aging population.
Well, this manager of yours is one hell of a swindler. You're not his only victims by a long shot.
Although I will say that this one episode of Bato helping a bunch of senior citizens get their life savings back from a defrauding banker is probably the best episode in the entire season. And that's mostly because it completely drops the stupid as all hell main plot. Any one of these themes could have worked as a main pillar in the narrative, but to approach all these themes as scattershot as they did, it could only come off as a shallow dive at best and empty platitudes at worst. And considering how hard they try to drive these points home when they can be bothered, it all just comes off as amateurish.
This is democracy, merely carried out to its logical extreme.
No, you're wrong. It's orchestrating nothing more than a witch hunt.
I can't even say that the show looks or sounds good either. The music itself isn't bad per se, but it just doesn't mesh with the show at all, and it just winds up being distracting. And the animation... well...
Thinkpole's rules are actually very easy to grasp.
I have no idea if this is relevant or not. But a little while before Sanji disappeared, at his final training camp for the world title,
it's just utterly shocking to me that at no point during the making of this show, somebody took a look at what they were creating and smacked themselves in the face and said, "Oh my god, we're creating something that looks worse than a 5-year-old video game." I mean, beyond the obviously awful fight scenes that are just hilarious more than anything, the show is chock-a-block full of minor but all too noticeable animation gaffes, gliding characters, iffy clipping, and because the direction is so listless, characters wind up looking like complete assholes, especially Boma. I swear, every time he appears, he looks like somebody put down their controller to go answer the door for pizza. It's not like he says anything in 95% of these scenes, or really does anything for that matter, so why is he here anyway? And yet, here he is, swaying just enough to let the audience know that he's alive, so you don't have to do the whole mirror under the nose trick. It's a good thing he doesn't appear until half the season's over, because if you tried to make a drinking game out of this, you'd empty out the cabinet by episode 3. But a big question still remains unanswered. What's worse, this or Ghost in the Shell 2017? And the answer is Ghost in the Shell 2017 by a country fucking mile. As I stated in my review of it, no one cared during the making of that movie, and not caring is always worse. Yeah, you can make the argument that 2045 did more overall damage to the standalone complex series and that it's way dumber than the movie, but you know what? At least they tried to do something different, badly as it was. Besides, Ghost in the Shell 2017 is so much more boring than 2045. I was constantly asking myself, what in the hell were they thinking when they chose to do this? And this? And definitely when they did this.
Representative.
Sir, is something the matter?
Meanwhile, there is no such engagement in 2017. And the more I thought about my feelings on 2045, the more I realized that while I do hate it, I kind of love hating it in a sort of perverse kind of way. It hits that sweet spot where I was saying, fuck this shit, but I was laughing while I was doing it. And I think it boils down to the fact that while it sucks out loud, it has the benefit of being audacious about it. For instance, everyone and their mother hates Batman and Robin. Except for me. I love that turd burger. And I find myself in that same kind of neighborhood with 2045. I mean, if you wanted to stretch it, you could make direct comparisons. The misfiring tonal shifts, the pun-laden bad guys.
All right, boys. Ready for one more kickoff?
Stay cool, bird boy.
But I'm speaking in broad terms. And in that spirit, I find my experience watching 2045 mimics a lot of my experience watching Batman and Robin, mainly because I find them to be explosive, neon-lit dumps on previously beloved canons. Now, because I have a lot more love for Ghost in the Shell than Batman, I think that's where a lot of my fuck yous are coming from. But the audacity of both films, willing and eager to just be ridiculous, endears me to them. Like, sure guys, go ahead, have a fight scene where Motoko can't land a punch on a naked billionaire cyborg. Have Tokusa act like he's goddamn Bruce Lee for no reason whatsoever. And yeah, sure, have this guy be here. I mean, if you're going to drop a deuce on an entire franchise, might as well light off a few fireworks. Yes, it's terrible. It's probably the worst animated Ghost in the Shell ever. From top to bottom, nothing makes sense, no creative decision worked as intended, and the story borders on unfollowable at certain points. And yet, I was still laughing and still engaged by my bafflement. Not sure how that scans as condemnation or praise, but it's the honest truth when I say that Ghost in the Shell SAC_2045 was the most memorable anime I've reviewed for OLDTAKU New Tricks, for good and for bad. Not sure if I'm making sense anymore, but there you all have it. God, I've certainly talked all of your ears off with my opinions on 2045, so I think it's time I pass the baton to all of you. What did you all think of 2045?